Okay, so when we talk about civil law, we're talking about the concept of what happens when there is conflict or there's a situation between an individual and another individual, or an individual and a company, or a business, or even an individual and even a government agency sometimes, right? So in the textbook, in the course of daily life, individuals are sometimes injured by someone else's negligence or in a moment of carelessness to cause an injury to another person. When people suffer through an injury through the fault of another, they can sue for compensation and for the injuries, suffering and loss of wages or damages to their property. So the idea of civil law is that you're looking for compensation for injury caused by someone else's actions, right? Now, criminal law is when you are the behavior of an individual is interfering within the normal function of the society, and therefore you have to uh, deal with the individual through a series of either punishments or fines or imprisonment in order to make sure you maintain daily life. This is about when an individual comes across an injury. Sometimes it's negligence, sometimes it is intentional, right? And we need a system of law that deals with it. This is the concept of civil law, right? So when we look at it, we look at two things, right? We look at tort. Tort means the harm caused to a person or property for which the law provides a civil remedy. So all you guys studied law, we all did your essays on different laws. It's about how old what legal systems dealt with that, right? How do you deal with the fact if I driving my car and I smash into Thomas's car, right? Whether it's intentional or non-intentional, there has to be some sort of compensation. I can't just walk away and say, okay, I'm done. And if it's not something where it's a heinous act or a criminal act, you can't expect me to go to jail. There's got to be some sort of situation. And even if I go to jail, it doesn't mean that Thomas's problems are solved. Just because I hit Thomas's car and I go to jail, Thomas still is, who pays for my car? How do I get this fixed? Right? So we're going to look right now at unintentional torts, right? And later we're going to look at intentional torts, which are a little different. So unintentional torts are injuries caused by an accident or the action that was not intended to cause harm, right? So this is what we talk about, that there's an action that's caused. It's not meant to cause harm, but there is something called negligence, right? That the person is not taking a standard of care in order to prevent this activity or behavior, right? And again, we're surrounded by this right now at Willowwood. Okay, we are, because we are open during a pandemic. We have to do a certain number of things in order to prevent some form of injury to somebody, right? Whether it's putting signs on the floor that people know which way to walk in traffic, whether it's us reminding students to have hand sanitizers here. And also the hand sanitizers are put near doors at all times so that we can prevent people from, get people to sanitize their hands. These are all things that you do to prevent unintentional torts or action things, right? In the cartoon, you have a little thing here. Sorry, not cartoon, but comic. What's the difference between a tort and a torte anyway? And here is a person's walking by and you see a manhole cover. This is a perfect example of what you would say injury, right? This person's walking, steps on a manhole cover, gets injured, right? No one was doing this on purpose. No one decided to say, let's end up open all manhole covers and want people to fall on them and get injured. This is what we would call an unintentional tort, but there is an aspect of negligence. Why did someone leave that manhole cover open? First off, it's hard to because they're super heavy, but it's open there. So when we look at unintentional torts, we have to look at the concept of negligence. Negligence is careless conduct that causes foreseeable harm to another person. Now, this is a key thing here, that you are considered negligent if you do something that does not to injure is, you are negligent if you have a conduct that causes harm that's not foreseeable. Does anybody know what I mean by the term foreseeable? If something needs to be foreseeable,
What is it?
it means that I can logically determine, Thomas, you have to, you can logically determine that you know it's going to happen. So if I spill water at the front door, but if I'm a gym teacher and I come in with a bottle of water and I drop the water and it spills on the gym floor, and I do nothing to either alert people that there's water there, I don't try to clean it up, I don't call for help to help me clean it up, am I negligent? Why? Right, so I'm aware it's there, but it's also foreseeable. It is foreseeable that someone's going to slip on that water. It is reasonable to believe that if I don't deal with that, someone's going to slip on that water, right? We are getting close to snow, nice, right? I have to clean my front driveway and my sidewalks by 12 hours because it's foreseeable that someone's going to slip there, right? It's not an imagined thing. Now, if I'm sitting here and I'm teaching and all of a sudden,
please submit your afternoon attendance.
I do it. If I'm sitting here and all of a sudden, Fred burls up from the middle of the floor with a bomb, says, "We're all gonna die," and he explodes and we all get injured. Is that foreseeable? No. I couldn't predict that in this room, Fred's going to burrow underneath it and jump up with a bunch of explosives, right? It's not foreseeable. So the idea is that when you argue about negligence, it's about, can you foresee the danger happening, right? So as teachers, we're constantly trained, and especially when we do health and safety, we're constantly trained in, is there a danger involved? Can you see it happening? And if a reasonable person can predict the danger, therefore you become negligent, right? So it says, again, it talks about here a thing about a concept of tort, right? So every day we hear about different claims for negligence. A woman sues a manufacturer because the bindings on her skis broke during a downhill race, causing her to fall and break her arm. A bar is sued because the bartender served drinks to a person who successfully killed someone in a car accident. Parents sue a hospital because a nurse gave their child the wrong medication, resulting in brain damage. In these cases, people sue for what they perceived as a careless or negligent conduct of others. In order to understand the defendant to be found negligent, each factors must be shown in figure 14.1. Now, you can't see them because the PDFs are messed up, but they're saying, I'll go over each one of them because each one talks about different types of stages. First is duty of care, which is the obligation to foresee and avoid careless actions that might cause of other. We all have a duty of care, right? You own a house, you have a duty of care. You drive a car, you have a duty of care. If you should be able to foresee what's going to happen. So if I am driving a car and I'm driving it at 60 kilometers per hour down an icy road and I hit somebody, am I negligent?
No.
I'm driving a car down a road going 60 kilometers per hour, it's icy, and I hit somebody. Am I negligent?
No.
Yeah.
Who said yeah?
Nathan?
Nathan said yeah? Right,
Because
I am
road, you
negligent.
shouldn't be driving that fast in like the first place.
Right, I can foresee that I'd not be able to react quickly. Now, what if I say, well, I have four-wheel drive and I have the, it doesn't matter, right? It is reasonable to believe that if I'm going to drive that fast during an icy road, I'm going to hurt somebody. That's what I'm talking about. So we all have a duty of care, right? We all have the basic level of you gotta be careful and be aware of what's going on. So it says the obligation to avoid careless actions that could cause someone harm. For example, if Caroline were hitting golf balls, she should foresee that her actions might harm Stuart, who is walking by. She would owe Stuart a duty of care, right? So which means if I am playing a sport that throws me throwing a fast ball and I see someone walking between us, I should stop because I know if I throw it and I'm walking, what's going to happen? Right. It's also called the neighbor principle, the legal responsibility to owe a duty of care not to harm one's neighbor through carelessness or negligence, right? The same thing It's when you own a property, I need to make sure that my property is not dangerous, right? So my neighbor will tell me, hey, Walid, we are doing construction on our house. I want to let you know, we're gonna have people here and we're gonna take out that thing here. So be careful when you walk by it. That's standard. Thank you for letting me know, right? If I'm going to do something that's going to affect the neighborhood or neighbor some noise, I should let them know. I have a responsibility to let someone know. A standard duty of care. We all have to do it, right? If you leave your bike on the sidewalk, someone might trip over it and break their leg. The person might sue you claiming that in law, you're using the sidewalk is your neighbor and you owe that person a duty of care, right? Which means you got to be able to, if you can foresee the activity leading to an accident, you can be sued, okay? There's a case, don't worry about that. And again, foreseeability, the ability to a reasonable person to anticipate the consequence of an action. Now, you'll see this in law when someone says a reasonable person. That means someone of sound mind who can predict things based on logic, right? If it is raining and there's a lightning storm and I say, go outside and play, is it foreseeable that someone could get injured?
Yeah.
Right, because a reasonable person say that's a bad idea. Reasonable. You can foresee what's going to happen. But if I say it's a nice day, it's going to go outside and play, then all of a sudden a meteor drops down and kills everybody, am I responsible?
No.
No, I
You can't
couldn't.
predict that.
Yeah, I can't predict that happening, right? I can't foresee that chain of events. Yeah. You said it again. I kicked you out. But again, these are foreseeable actions that people can do that if you just pay attention to, you should be fine, right? Right now with COVID, it's foreseeable. So if someone walks into a room without wearing a mask, and you can't social distance between 2 meters or greater, is it foreseeable that something's going to happen? Right. The noise up there can be foreseeable. If someone were to fall down and injure somebody, you could sue the school, well, duty of care. You should have foreseen that if you have people pounding on a roof to put on solar panels during the day, and you weren't careful, someone could get injured, okay? Next one is standard of care, which is the degree of caution or level of conduct expected of a reasonable person. What should you do, right? So standard of care. If I'm working on a roof, should I be given stuff to protect myself?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if I'm working on a roof, I should go there and like, well, to say, here's a harness that you should wear in case you fall, right? If they say go up on the roof and don't worry about it, you'll be fine, and I fall and get injured, I could sue the company because it's foreseeable I'm gonna fall off the stupid roof. You should have given me something to take care of it, right? So if a court decides that a defendant owed the plaintiff a duty of care, it must then decide how much care the defendant owed the plaintiff. Under common law, the court came up with a standard of measurement for the care of a caution someone who should exercise to avoid harming others. In determining the standard of care, the court looked what a reasonable person should do. A reasonable person is someone who behaves in a way that expects most people to behave, right? So reasonable person is, I expect everyone to, so your own standard of care or level of care based upon a reasonable person. And a reasonable person is a legal term used to describe a person who exercises a sensible level of reason, intelligence, and care, right? If I'm here at work and they say, well, go on this ladder, go up there and fix that and fix the roof, is that reasonable?
No.
No, I'm not trained. I'm not going up on a ladder. I can get injured. Why would you expect me to do that, right? If the plug starts sparking and they say, well, take a look at that plug in there. Should I look at it?
No, you shouldn't.
No, it's not reasonable, right? But if someone says, oh, this plug is sparking, everyone get out of the room, leave, that's, now, if something happens to you as you're leaving the room, you can't sue me because what did I do? I offered a standard of care. I'm a reasonable person. I see smoke coming from there. We should leave, right? You can't say I'm suing law because he didn't get us. No, I got you out. Something happened. I couldn't predict that was going to happen, but as soon as I saw it happening, I got you out. Okay, so that's what it means to have a standard, stage 2, standard of care. Can you provide a level of care? So if I owe you something, it has to be reasonable. So take for example, the sidewalk issue, right? If I'm walking on a sidewalk, so I mean shoveling, right? I owe you a standard of care to clean my sidewalk. 12 hours is reasonable, right? From the snow starts falling till I have 12 hours to clean it up. That's reasonable for me to, if I'm work, get home, clean the snow, right? It's a reasonable amount of time to say, you've got to clean it by that time. If I look there, and again, we've all lived in the GTA. We've seen people, and we've walked by sidewalks where people haven't touched the snow, right? That's not reasonable, right? Like, hey man, clean your snow, you've got half a day, right? If you let it sit there for 3-4 days and the ice is over and I get injured, you can't claim, well, I tried. It's no, you owed me a standard of care. A reasonable person can predict I'm gonna trip on that ice, right? Same way that if it's cold and you see snow, what's gonna happen to snow if it's really, really cold? It's going to, if it's gonna freeze, which makes it harder for people to walk, standard of care. I might put salt or dirt on a place where I can't get at the ice. Why? Because it's reasonable. Look, it's icy, but you can walk on the dirt. The dirt will give you some sort of traction. You should be fine. Okay? Now, something called specialized standard of care, the degree of caution or level of conduct considered, let's say, for a reasonable person, the same specialized training, which means people who have specialized training owe an even higher standard of care, right? So individuals with special skills, expertise, and training, such as engineers, lawyers, and have a higher standard of care towards others than a reasonable person has. The standard of care is called specialized. The test for a specialized standard of care is what a reasonable person, the same specialized training, would have done in a situation. For example, a doctor would consider to be negligent if she does not provide the same level of care as another doctor in the same area of practice. Also, specialists must meet a higher standard of care than a general practitioner. Okay, so my wife was going to have a baby, and I want to go into the delivery room, and she was having a C-section, and they guide you up because they don't want any infection, right? And I was about to go in, and I said, "Wait a minute, you forgot. Should I walk in without a mask?" And they stopped me and they freaked. They're, "Oh my God, thank you so much," because had I walked in, what would have happened? Yeah, they would have gotten in trouble and they couldn't continue on the C-section because you have to practice standard of care, right? So that's why doctors disinfect and gown up and wear a mask. And even if I'm in the room and I'm not doing anything, I have to wear a mask, right? Specialists, if you need a special type of surgery, they might have a doctor there and a team on standby in case the doctor has to go or something happens, okay? Even now, again, if we talk about COVID and what's going on with COVID, hospitals had to go. Has anyone gone to a hospital since it's gone down with COVID? No. Okay, so if you have to go, it's actually really safe because they do a bunch of things over the beyond the care. So they scan you, they give you a mask, they keep you in a separate room. They isolate you. The doctors all wear PPE, and I'm talking about full-on gown, face masks, gloves when they get near you. They're supposed to switch them out every time they leave, right? If you have something that's a little more dangerous, they may put you in a zero pressure room, which means the air doesn't go anywhere, the air gets set out someplace else. It is a far higher standard of care than a professional. A specialist is supposed to even do far more than that, right? They may have someone on standby in the room during a surgery. So it may be something simple as just draining your knee, but it may have someone else there in case something goes wrong, right? They may have an anesthesiologist, but they may have a doctor, a cardiologist there on standby in case something goes wrong, right? That's because they have to go beyond that. Medical negligence is, in most situations, a medical practitioner cannot touch a patient, perform an operation, or administer treatment unless the patient has given consent. So, however, Consent is not always possible. In an emergency situation, the patient is unconscious after the accident. In such cases, healthcare professionals will act without consent of a person's life or health is seriously injured. A family member or friend can also make medical decisions. The person is unable to make them. In this case, mental illness or disability, the legal right to make medical decisions can be assigned to someone else. Okay? So it means that doctors must get your consent to do stuff to you. Right? If you're awake and you are conscious and you are sound mind, you can refuse medical help. You're bleeding. I'm fine. Don't touch me. But if you're unconscious, you're told, you are basically thought to, hey, you're consenting. Yes.
What if you're not of sound mind? What if you're delirious?
Then someone else has to make, then a relative has to make a decision. If they can't reach a relative, then they err on you want to live. Right? So if Regina is injured, let's say I'm Regina's dad, right? And she's can't make a decision, I make it for her. Right? They'll go to the next of kin, do you give us permission to do this? Okay, but Regina's awake and she goes, hey, this is gonna help you. She goes, nope, I don't want it, you can't make me do it, I refuse. They can't do that. You can only give, that's why when you guys take, is someone take first aid courses? Right, well, so you take a first aid course, they say, what if someone doesn't want me to give them CPR and they're unconscious? Doesn't matter, right? You get it anyway. They can say, you shouldn't have touched me. That's nice, but I still am protected because you didn't say no, right? That's why when they say people do this, they're choking, you have to ask them, do you want me to help you? Do you want me to help you? Right? Because if I can't touch you until you say yes. Sometimes some first aid say, well, if a person says no, it goes, well, wait till they pass out. Then you can help them, okay? So one, the patient must be voluntary, they cannot be pressured, and the consent must be informed, which means the doctor must explain the medical procedure to the patient, how they're gonna receive it, any dangers or side effects, right? So a doctor has to tell you, this is what you're gonna get, this is what's gonna happen to you, these are the side effects, right? So doctors who deal with cancer patients, right? And they have to get treatment for chemo, the doctors will say, look, here are your odds for survival. Here's what happens if you don't do it. Here's the what you're gonna experience. Here's what statistically says that you're probably gonna go through. You're probably gonna lose your hair. You're probably gonna feel nauseous. Probably not gonna wanna eat, no energy. They'll explain everything to you because they inform, because I said, then they do it. I had to get surgery, and before I went in, I had to sign 3 or 4 papers saying I knew what was happening, and I'm giving them permission, right? And I go, what? It goes, because we have to get you to agree to all of this before we start, right? And that's because it was a surgery that I had to do, and I was like, but even if it's life-threatening or not, they'll say, do you consent to this, right? So medical professionals must get your consent at all times. Okay, so damage occurred, plaintiff must prove that it was caused by the doctor's failure to adequately inform the risk, right? Which means if a doctor doesn't tell you the entire risk of the surgery and they're injured, then you can sue. But if the doctor tells you everything's gonna go wrong and everything that could go wrong and it happens, you can't sue, right? So they say, I'm gonna scope your knee, I'm gonna do arthroscopic surgery on your knee, and it's a 27, there's a 30% chance that I will mess up, that it could go wrong and you won't put any weight on your knee ever again. Okay, happens. I'm gonna sue you. I told you there's risk. Right? If the doctor says, no, it's fine, don't worry about it, everything's cool, we're good. That's a problem, okay? That also happens when you have to get anesthesia, like whenever I had to get, what did I have to get? Like a root, something with my tooth, a thing. Yeah, and I had to sign off on getting gassed because I was under, right? Sign that you consent to receive this type of thing, right? Because I'm unconscious. I don't remember getting it. I remember it happening. I don't remember the time. I remember it happening. It was over, and I couldn't keep track of time. And I remember it was done. If you ask me what went down, I go, I remember it happening, sort of. But then all of a sudden, it's over. Stage 3 is causation, right? Cause and effect. Third factor of a plaintiff must prove the negligence is the actions of the defendant actually cause the plaintiff's injuries, which means did what you do cause my injury? If I didn't, again, I brought in bottled water, I dropped it, it spilled all over the place, I didn't tell anybody, and you slipped and fell on it. Is it my fault?
Yeah.
Right, because the cause, the water on the ground, the effect is you slip and fall, right? Foreseeable, understandable, and I caused the fact, right? Yes.
What if you indirectly cause an injury? Like, let's say you do something regular and it's something that people just do every day. I don't know. And I can't give any examples because I can't think of any, but let's say that somehow ends up injuring somebody when it's something that you could easily overlook, like something that it's not even a hazard that you overlook, it's just something regular.
So that's a good point. Thanks for answering that. So there is a situation where if there's no causation, it doesn't matter. So let's say we're playing soccer and we're kicking the ball back and forth and it hits you on your shoulder and you're fine. And you get into your car and you notice your shoulder gets sore, and as you're driving, you hit something, right? Or you lose numbness in your shoulder and you hit something. I could say, look, we're playing a sport. I hit you in the shoulder playing a soccer. It happens all the time. How was I to know that that would cause nerve injury in your arm 3 hours later that would cause you to lose control of a car, right? That's not necessarily like it's too far down the road for me to predict that, right? But and this has happened on several ski trips we've gone to as a school. A kid goes skiing, they fall off their skis. We check, are you okay? I'm fine. And then an hour later, they have a busted ankle, right? What I should have done is the moment a kid gets injured, I see ankle, look at them, take them to the hospital, right? Don't go by they seem okay, right? Call the ski patrol, call someone else, show some like, I've got to make sure they're okay. But don't say, you're fine, right? We're playing soccer, I hit Helen in the head with a soccer ball. I should check to see if she's concussed. I can't say, but if she passes out 10 minutes later, yeah, because I hit her in the head with a ball. Concussion is a thing that could happen. All right? Think about sports. When you play sports, there's custom protocol. You get injured once, what happens? You gotta lay on the ground. You're gonna wait till someone comes. You gotta go through all these things because it's like this could happen. It's cause and effect. So if it's something where a reasonable person can see, Thomas, you're fine. But if it's something where something happens, again, perhaps someone is falling, you catch them, and you help them up, they're okay. 2 days later, I hurt my knee because you caught me the wrong way. You could say, well, that's not causing how do you know that happened? How do you know I caused that problem? Okay? So it's usually determined by the but-for test. If an injury would have not happened but for the defendant's actions, then the actions were cause and effect to the injury. Suppose a teacher took a group of students on a canoe trip and failed to supply life jackets. In a storm, the canoe capsized, tossing the students into the lake. If the student drowned, the court would have likely said that she would not have drowned, but for the teacher's failure to provide life jacket. Therefore, negligence was in a cause and effect of the injury. So, guys, remember this happened about 4 or 5 years ago, where there was a bunch of kids who went on a camping trip. C.W. Jeffries on Algonquin Park, and a kid died. And when people went and looked into it, they didn't do a swim test, right? Like they took kids camping and didn't test if those kids could swim. Some of the kids actually went camping but failed the swim test. So when they were swimming, one kid died.
Well,
They were, yeah.
sorry, did They didn't take life jackets either.
Yeah, I don't think they take the life jackets. I think and then like the principal got in trouble because he said, I made sure everyone passed that swim test, and he didn't. It was so bad for years as here, we couldn't get insurance, and our trips, we had to make sure there was a lifeguard. It was like all insurance from many different organizations went through the roof, where we had to go through so many different hoops to prove that. We didn't do swimming and trips for a while because we'd be liable. Because if we went on we can't do now, but if we ever went on a camping trip, people want to go on a camping trip would have to all pass a swim test, right? Because you have to. And you would also have to get life jackets. And the teachers would have to do a head count. And it have to also be a number ratio between teachers to student ratio. All those things have to be there, because if we don't, but for you and someone dies, it's over, right? Suppose a student fell into the water because another person accidentally pushed her, and she drowned only after a careless boat driver hit her, knocking her unconscious. But for not having the life jacket, she would not have drowned. Therefore, but for being pushed in, she would not have drowned. She might have been saved, but for the boat driver who hit her, causing her to lose consciousness. What was the cause and effect of the student's drowning? Who should be liable for the drowning? The teacher, the person who pushed the student out of the water, or the boat driver? Should they all be liable? To deal with the difficulty issue of who should be liable in such cases, all provinces have statutes in accordance to allow to hold each negligent parties liable to a certain degree. The concept is dividing is called apportionment. Apportionment, which means in that situation, because everyone kind of did something wrong, everyone gets a bit of the blame, right? That's why when you sue somebody, you know how you sue? You sue everybody, right? Helen slips and falls, she sues me, she sues the school, she sues all of you. She sues the contractor who made the carpet. You sue everybody in the room because I don't know who's liable, right? That's what you do. So doesn't mean Helen goes, I don't think Wall did anything wrong, but I'm going to sue him anyway because he might be responsible for that if he knew the carpet was there. This is relatively new carpet, but there used to be carpet here that used to have a little notch in it, and people would trip on that. I'm held responsible because I'm supposed to tell my boss this is a problem. So even though I don't have any control over it, they could still say, well, I said, I did tell them, they didn't do anything about it. Well, you still are responsible for letting those kids in that classroom. Okay. Next one is remoteness of damage, harm that could not have been foreseen by the defendant due to the lack of close connection between the wrong action and injury. And that just means that if someone plays volleyball, right, and then 2 weeks later their wrist hurt from a volleyball game at school, I could say, how do you know that that volleyball game caused your injury to school? It's too remote, right? It might have, right? You might have strained it. You might have injured it. But why didn't you go get help? If 2 weeks later, well, it's totally ruined. Well, how do you know it's what happened? Anything else could have happened between that volleyball game and 2 weeks later with your injury that you could have used that could have caused it. I can't foresee that. Intervening act is an unforeseeable event that interrupts a chain of events that's caused by the defendant, which means if there's something in the middle of this kind of negligence that stops it or intervenes, I'm no longer eligible. So in another example of a student who drowned on the canoe trip, the question was asked, would the teacher be liable if the negligent boat driver hit the student and the student drowned as a result? The teacher failed to provide life jackets was certainly causing effect of the drowning, but the act of the boat driver, but was the act of the boat driver an intervening act? Should the teacher have foreseen such a thing could happen? It could be argued that the act of the boat driver was an intervening act and only the boat driver should be held liable for the drowning. So should I be, now some could argue that no, it is foreseeable. If you're in a lake, what happens in a lake? People swim, people boats. Jet ski, yeah, you can get injured in a lake if it's a big lake, it's active, people are in there. It's foreseeable that's why you don't have boats. But again, you can argue that, well, shouldn't a person driving a boat be aware of who's in front of them, be aware of their environment? So as their intervening act. There's something also called, the last part of this, because we're almost done, it's called the thin skull rule. The principle that the defendant is liable for all damages caused by negligence despite any pre-existing conditions that make the plaintiff more prone to injury. It just means you have to assume that everyone is like fragile, right? So if Regina and I are playing basketball and we're playing and I kind of shove and she hits the wall, boom, goes down, she gets a major injury, I can't say, I just tapped her. I have to assume that her bones are like glass. And any injury she might have, she goes, well, I've always had like weak, soft bones, right? Fragile bones. So therefore, I get injured a lot easier. I'm still responsible for what's called the thin skull rule, right? These are all the things that happen with what you call torts, unintentional torts, which means I didn't plan for this to happen, but these are all my liabilities. And again, negligence is a key thing. If I am negligent, I am responsible. So it's something that we deal with at school a lot, right? Especially here. If I'm not on duty, I'm negligent, right? Parent hits a kid in the parking lot, I'm negligent because I wasn't on duty on time, right? I know my duty. That's why sometimes I'll say, guys, we have to leave early because I need to be on duty on time. I can't say, well, my principal stopped to talk to me. That's not my problem. I know it's foreseeable. I have to be there on time. Okay? All right, so I want you to basically review those pages. And I have it on Blackboard, and it's questions 1 to 9. Again, don't worry about writing the answers down, but be prepared to discuss them in class tomorrow. They're just reviewing all the things we talked about in this section. Are there any questions about this part? Now, this is just unintentional torts, which means I didn't plan it. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about intentional torts, or is it intentional torts? Or no, we're talking about a special liability, which means when you have something, you are liable, which means you have to be responsible for things happening. So, like computers, right? If this computer blows up in my face, they're liable for it because they're not supposed to do that, right? If I eat certain food, it can't have glass in it. They're liable for it. You can't do that. You have to go beyond just being negligent. You have to actively make sure your product is safe, right? So we're gonna go through the special types of liability, which means that goes beyond negligent. Negligent is like, well, I didn't think it through. I didn't foresee, I did actions that were foreseeable, but I didn't plan for it. Liability is I have to specifically make sure and test something because it's my responsibility to make sure the product I put out is safe, right? Like cars have to be safe, right? If you own a car company, I'm responsible for it. That's why when things in a car company, sometimes they will pull them out of service or they'll call recall because I have to be safe, right? Right. Even if it's only only if it's a small percentage of cars that have this sort of the defect, I have to pull them all off, get it all fixed because it's my liability. Okay, so we're going to talk about special type of liability tomorrow. Any other questions before I stop the recording and the share?